Welcome to another episode of Rob Wright's Gen X Pop Culture, and today we're going to talk about one of my favorite 80s comedies, Moonlighting. Moonlighting starring Bruce Willis in his debut and Sybil Shepherd, along with Alice Beasley and Curtis Armstrong. It ran for 5 seasons on ABC, and today I'm going to break it down by talking about the casting and some interesting stuff about the casting. I'll talk a little bit about the production, which, wow, it had some interesting stories. I'm going to talk about some of the things that made it great and made it unique. And then I'm going to share some of my favorite episodes with you. Also, I want to let you guys know that Moonlighting had some news recently this week. I didn't even know about it as I started the research on this, but it just went on to Hulu. All 5 seasons are available on Hulu now. So it's a great show. Go check it out, and I'll tell you why coming up. So we're going to talk a little bit about the casting for Moonlighting and the interesting stories that came about with that. So it was created by Glenn Gordon Caron, and he was asked by ABC Productions to produce a detective show. This was after his success in writing for the TV show Taxi and for his successful show Remington Steele. He was kind of hesitant to write a detective show, but after seeing a production of Taming the Shrew in Central Park, starring Raul Julia and Meryl Streep, he came up with the idea for Moonlighting as a detective show with a little bit of comedy and romance in it. So Moonlighting really is a mix of the comedy, drama, with a little bit of thriller, mystery, and romance. And it's very interesting. So let's talk a little bit about the cast. So first of all, Sybil Shepherd was cast as the lead, Maddie Hayes. So Sybil Shepherd had been a movie star and a former model. The idea that Glenn Caron had when he was writing this, he was writing about a former model as a detective in the show, and it just screamed Sybil Shepherd that this is the perfect person for him. And so what he did is he took it to a couple of the casting directors and a couple of the other producers and asked, well, can we get Sybil Shepherd, not even realizing that he could get her. And so what they did was they contacted Sybil, sent her the script, and they met at a French restaurant, which unfortunately doesn't exist anymore in LA. And when they met her, Glenn Gordon said that upon meeting her, his jaw was on the floor of the table as a joke because she's such a gorgeous actress and she's very beautiful in this series. She's amazing in this, not only acting, but she's got gorgeous looks. They really shot her well in this series. But besides that, Sybil Shepherd really liked it. And she mentioned that it was like a Hawksian comedy. Unfortunately, Glenn Gordon didn't quite get what she was meaning by that, but she was talking about the famous director Howard Hawks, who had many hits, including some of my favorites. But she was referring to some of her favorite comedies like Bringing Up Baby and His Girl Friday. And so she was on board with playing this character, and she did an amazing job. It was a great cast to cast her. The casting of Bruce Willis as David Addison, the smart aleck detective, was very interesting. At the time, Bruce Willis was an up-and-coming actor. He hadn't been in anything really yet, and this was his breakout role. So in looking for a leading man for this, they searched wide and far. They searched all over LA, New York, even into Canada and Toronto and Montreal and different areas of arts for the right leading man. They interviewed over 2,000 leading men. And Bruce came to the audition with his head shaved because he'd cut his own hair. He had some earrings in his ears, and he was wearing combat fatigue. So very different image of Bruce Willis that we've seen throughout the years. But apparently when his audition came about, he hopped right up on the counter and just owned it. And Glenn Gordon was like, wow. And he started talking about him, and they actually thought that they were talking about the guy before him. But no, he goes, no, go back and get that guy, as Bruce had left. And they went back and got him. And then Glenn Gordon said that he was perfect for the part. Now, the problem is that they had to convince the studio because ABC was funding this whole production, which is a rarity at the time, and I'll get into that a little bit later as I talk a little bit more about the production. But ABC had to sign off on the leading man, and they didn't see him as a leading man. And you sit there and you hear that, and you're like, what? Bruce Willis is amazing. And what we know about Bruce Willis now, I mean, he's definitely leading man material, but at the time, they didn't think he was. So Glenn Gordon had to convince them, and he had to convince Sybil at first, but then Sybil came around. Um, so he did a demo for Bruce so that they could send it to the network, and they did it with a different actress because Sybil Shepherd wasn't keen on doing a demo. She already got the part. She didn't need to do that. So they hired another actress, and they did some of that. Some of that footage is available on YouTube right now. And so they did a scene for that. That still didn't convince them. So they gave him a little bit more money, and Glenn Gordon convinced Sybil to do another take with Bruce Willis to do something to demonstrate. Or, he said that they were just going to pay them and not do the show. So she got on board. They did the scene, and Glenn Gordon also put it with a couple of other scenes of famous couples, and it was a really good production that they sent to the studio. The studio heads looked at it, and they liked it, but they wanted to test it on a test audience. So what they did was they got their test audience together, and they asked them one question, and the question was, would you watch this guy as a leading man every week in a TV show? And the audience, thank goodness, had a resounding yes. And so Bruce Willis was cast in the role as David Addison, the lead actor, and he is fantastic in the show. It launched his career. It launched several movies for him, and we'll get into that further as we talk about the production. Alice Beasley was cast as Agnes DePesto, the fast-talking rhyming assistant, and she's phenomenal in this role. I can't imagine anybody else as Agnes DePesto. She just nailed it. One of the things that we'll talk about with the production of this show is that it was a very witty, fast-talking show. And Alice Beasley was from New York, and she was used to talking very fast anyway, so she fit right in. And the rhymes just become her. She did an amazing job. There are a few Miss DePesto episodes where she just nails it, and she does a great job. I love her in this role. And then in season 3, they needed another leading man to kind of offset Bruce and to maybe give Alice Beasley a love interest. So Curtis Armstrong was hired in season 3. And you may know him from Revenge of the Nerds playing Booger. So he was hired as Herbert Viola, and he really nails the part. He does a great job in this series as well. So the cast was complete. And, really the way that they worked it out over the 5 seasons, the way these actors really put this show together was phenomenal. I love all 4 of these actors. There were a couple of bit actors and a couple of guest star actors that were great in this as well, but these 4 really took the cake for me and really made the show. Okay, the production of this show is a very interesting story altogether. So, Moonlighting, many unusual things about it for the time, but one of the main ones is that it was one of only 3 shows that were actually produced in-house by a broadcast network. So the other 2 were NBC's Punky Brewster and CBS's Twilight Zone Revival were the other 2. And the network really controlled the show. So the interesting thing is that all the profits would go directly to the network. So it gave them a greater chance to earn profits, and they had more flexibility. They could pay more. And as a result, Glenn Caron had a lot of control over the production. And Glenn Gordon was a perfectionist. So this show was considered a dramedy. So typically during that time, you had comedies that were 30 minutes long, sitcoms were 30 minutes long, and your more dramatic type shows were an hour long. Well, Moonlighting was an hour long, but it was a mix of drama and comedy, and we'll get more into that and what makes it unique. But with that production, with the hour-long take, you would have different scripts. And so usually a typical script for about an hour-long show was about 60 pages. Well, Moonlighting, because of the way that it shot, the complexities of the characters and the dialogue, scripts were 120 pages. And usually shows took about a week to shoot because they had the deadline to get it out. Moonlighting sometimes took 12, 16, 14 days to shoot. And a lot of times with the writers were writing right up to the last minute. They were even shooting some of the scenes right up to the production day that it was supposed to go out. And in some cases, the final cut was actually beamed live via satellite that same day. So that's the hectic of this production. Obviously, as actors, they had a hard time with that because I mean, my goodness, can you imagine getting rewrites to a script the last day of shooting or at the last minute? So it was very difficult to really keep up with, but it caused some of the friction, and we'll talk a little bit about that as we talk about the production. But the other thing about this show that is just fantastic is the cinematography. So they used a lot of diffusion. They used a lot of different ways to shoot, particularly Maddie Hayes. So what they would do is use different filters for showing her scenes. And the head cinematographer, Gerald Finnerman, really had a way that he liked to shoot a leading lady. And so if you see, particularly in the early seasons, you'll see that Maddie Hayes, the way that he shoots her is a little bit different. And it really brings out Sybil's beauty, and it brings out her character and just her in just a special way, which was unusual for television because you would usually shoot a leading lady like that for a movie production rather than a TV show. So that was great. Another thing that we will talk about is one of the episodes that we'll get into and we'll talk about as one of my favorites. They did in black and white, and that cost a lot back then because you didn't really shoot anything in black and white. So they had to get the old cameras, and they actually had to go back to MGM to produce it. And ABC made them put a disclaimer in front of the show, just like in The Wizard of Oz, saying that, hey, the first part's going to be in color. The next part's going to be in black and white. And I will talk about the person who introduced that because it's a unique story coming up in my favorite episode discussion. But that made it unique with the way they shot it. It was just amazing. Their scripts were witty, and like I said, they were twice as long. So it put a lot of pressure on the actors. The other thing about it was that Sybil Shepherd was a morning person. She liked to get on the set and get everything in the morning, and Bruce Willis was a little bit better in the afternoon. He's more of a partier, happy-go-lucky guy, and he was better in the afternoon. So just in shooting schedules and shooting everything made it a little bit difficult for them to shoot it. Like I said, it would take 12 to 14 days and some. The other thing about it is that like a normal production around that time would cost about $900,000 to produce per episode. Moonlighting sometimes took twice as much, and some of that's because of the different tricks and the different stuff that they did for each of the episodes, but also because they took longer to produce an episode. It would cost quite a bit more because you're paying for all the cast and crew to do that. So part of the reason for that is because Glenn Gordon really wanted a quality show. He wanted a quality production, and it was just something that would really stand out. And he wanted to make it, really unique. And with him having full control over it, that's what he could do. So some of the things that happened was, Sybil Shepherd began to get upset with this style of shooting. She was used to movies. She was used to fixed schedule, having the script, having that done. And she would get very frustrated with Glenn Gordon about it. It made it harder for them to work with her on it. Other aspects about it were just different things with the production. So one of the things that made Moonlighting so great, and we'll talk a little bit more about this, was the fact that you had a set where the two actors would interact in the office and they would slam doors and do different things to the set. Well, they always had to replace the doors every season. They did different things because of the way it was shot and the different things they had to do with it. So you think you're slamming the door hundreds of takes in different episodes, that door is going to wear down and they're going to have to redo and rebuild entire sets over that. Another thing that they said was that I thought was interesting in the production was there are a lot of scenes in the show where they're having to drive. And a couple of funny anecdotes on that is that Sybil Shepherd and Bruce Willis said that they sometimes would have the lines, which they just got the script for, on the dashboard out of view, or on kind of the windshield portion that was just out of view, so they could actually read the lines while they were driving. And the other thing is that they'd be amazing takes that the production studio would do and the cameramen were doing, but then they'd realize that, hey, wait a minute, they're driving a car and talking, and so like you're turning to each other. That's not realistic because you've got to be focused on the road. And so a lot of the production cameramen and directors basically said, hey, you know what? We'll let it go. There's not a reason to reshoot it just to get them to be more realistic with how they're driving the car. So I thought that was interesting. So everything kind of started to hit the fan with some of this with different problems. So a couple of problems that you had was you had a writer's strike that affected some of the filming. You had other things like you had Super Bowls and other things that affected the production and affected when it would go out. It was usually on Tuesday nights that you would see Moonlighting, and it eventually shifted as it lost ratings and lost audiences, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But it just was a grueling show to shoot. The great thing about it was like season 1 had the 2-hour pilot, which was like a movie, and it was originally kind of a filler show that came out in the spring of 1985. So the first season is rather short because it was, filling another show that got booted. So season 2 came around, and what they did was they turned around and shot season 2 rather quickly. Season 2 had 16 Emmys nominations, and it was a really fantastic season. Season 2 and season 3 are probably the best of the show. There's so many great shows that they did in season 2, but they were scheduled to always do 22 episodes, and they never got to 22 episodes. I think the most they got was 14 or 15, and that's usually season 2 and season 3. Season 2 had, so many Emmys and so many nominations. Unfortunately, it didn't really win because Moonlighting was so unique during the time, and it was an up-and-coming show. However, that changed in season 3. Season 3, they really hit their stride. They won several Emmys. Bruce Willis and Sybil Shepherd both won, and it really took off as one of the best shows on television at the time. During season 3, at the end of season 3, it made it a little bit harder to shoot because 2 significant things happened. Bruce Willis hurt his shoulder in a skiing accident, and then Sybil Shepherd was pregnant with twins. And so they had a difficult time doing some of the end shots for season 3. And as we get into season 4, they had to kind of work around Sybil Shepherd and Bruce Willis' schedules because she was pregnant. He was recovering from injury. And then Bruce Willis got the amazing motion picture Die Hard. And so he was away shooting Die Hard. And so they had to work their schedule around his movie shoot and then her pregnancy. The other thing is that there was tension among both the actors. They said that at the time, both the actors started to get on each other's nerves, and they became what we quote-unquote know as prima donnas. There's stories about them getting mad over whose trailer was closer to the set. It got to the point in season 4 and season 5 where they would use doubles for each other because they couldn't shoot each other at the same time due to different commitments and due to the fact they didn't like each other. There was also talk of in the last seasons that they didn't like each other so much that they would only do one take and that would be it, and they would have to take that. So that kind of led to kind of the ratings decline in season 4 and season 5. It's part of the reason why season 5 wasn't as many episodes as they could get, and it was part of the reason why the show kind of tanked and kind of went away. Unfortunately, that's what happened. Sometimes you get infighting with different actors and actresses, but eventually, many years later, they did make up. Bruce Willis and Sybil Shepherd had been on good terms, and they came together with Glenn Gordon to do a retrospective of Moonlighting, which is very interesting, very heartwarming. It's on YouTube if you want to go and watch it. And then if you get a chance, watch the hilarious roast of Bruce Willis where Sybil Shepherd comes on and talks about it. She does talk about one interesting thing between the two of them. They had such good chemistry in the first couple of seasons with the love scenes. And part of the reason for that is even though Bruce was attracted to Sybil and she was attracted to him, they did have a moment where they met up, but they claimed they never hooked up. They never slept together. Nothing ever happened between the two. And it made the chemistry between them on the show a lot better because they never actually hooked up in real life, which I think was good for the show, and I'm glad that kept the tension for the greatness of the show. So yeah, go check that out. Check out the roast that she does on Bruce Willis, and check out their retrospective with Glenn Gordon. It's fascinating. It tells you a lot about the show. All right, let's talk about some of the things that make it unique, and some of the production as well, and we'll get into that. So we're talking about the uniqueness of Moonlighting. As I had said before, it was one of the new formats called the dramedies. So, like I said, dramedies were 30 minutes, dramas were an hour, and Moonlighting broke that mold because it was a mix of comedy, drama, a little bit of thriller, and a little bit of mystery, all wrapped up into one. And that's one of the great things that makes the show so amazing, because it had a lot of those innovations. You would have one episode that would start with some kind of mystery or some kind of murder or some kind of robbery or something that started that would kind of hook you and get you caught up into, oh my gosh, what's going on here? And then they would get to the next day where you'd see David Addison, Matty Hayes, and David would always have something hilarious coming into the office or during the office doing something, and then Matty would come in and you would see him both come in doing something funny in the office, and then the client comes in, and then that's where kind of it takes off with the back to the seriousness of it. So it made it really great and really entertaining because they were able to do all these things in an hour-long episode, which really kept your attention and kept you entertained. Also, like I said, it was fast-paced, so the script and the dialogue was really quick, especially in those office scenes where they're back and forth with witty repartee. And one of the things that the writers said about it is, usually on television at the time, if you wrote a joke that the audience wouldn't get, you would just cut it from the show. But in Moonlighting, Glenn Gordon Caron said that no, leave those in, because on second and third watching, the people would finally get it. And so as a kid watching some of this, there was a lot of jokes I didn't get, but as an adult watching again, I caught a lot of them, and it just made it even funnier for me. And going back and watching Moonlighting again, see if you can't catch some of those jokes and some of those innuendos. They're really quick, especially with David Addison's character, played by Bruce Willis, where he's got some quick little schnides that are just hilarious. Take your time and watch some of those. They're just hilarious. And then, of course, Agnes Depesto answering the phone. Some of the things that she says and answering the phone in rhymes are just hilarious as well, if you take time to really listen to that. Another really huge thing that they did, and we talked about this in one of the classes I had in film school, was breaking the fourth wall. That was a no-no back then. Breaking the fourth wall, talking to the audience, talking about the actual production of the show, and losing the illusion of a realistic show was not something you normally did. Moonlighting broke that. They are very famous for that. So they would talk to the audience directly. They would make fun of their own writing. So, for example, one of the things that they did was you had an episode that we'll talk about in a minute where you had FBI guys in Maddie's office, FBI guys in Bruce Willis's David Addison's office, and one of the comments that David Addison makes is, "Did the writers Xerox the wrong scene?" So they were always making fun of their own writing, making fun of themselves. Another good example of that is the second season, the Christmas episode. At the very end, they actually open up the set, and you see all of the production folks, all the scriptwriters, everybody involved in Moonlighting and their families, and they sing Christmas carols, and there's fake snow, and it's a really heartwarming seasonal ending to an episode. But they really break the fourth mold, and they show all these people. It added something to the story and made it a little bit funnier. So, I mean, that was great. The other thing that they did was cold open. So a lot of times they would open the show where you'd have Maddie and David talking about something that may or may not had to do with the show. And part of that is because they need to fill a little bit of time in the episodes, but also sometimes, like I mentioned with the disclaimer, sometimes it was that. So I'll talk about a couple of those in my favorite episodes, but there's one where they're talking about a funk video. And then there's another one where a very famous actor comes in and talks about the episode of Moonlighting being in partial black and white and partial color. And some of the things that he says are hilarious. But it was just hilarious. There were other openings where they would introduce it as kind of a newsreel. Hey, and America waits for another new episode of Moonlighting, and they talked about the injury and the pregnancy in that. They also talked about the writer's strike and how they were waiting for the writer's strike at the beginning of an episode. Another very famous episode in reaction to the Emmys. So the Emmys were shot on a Sunday, and the Emmy Awards were on a Sunday. And like I said, Moonlighting for season 2 was nominated for 16, and they really didn't do a good job of winning. So Glenn Gordon Caron wrote a specific cold opening for one of the episodes right after that, where David's mom is ill and in the hospital and expected to make a clean recovery, and they're saying, Doc, we can't lose 16 Emmys. And they're joking about that, and then the tagline joke was that because they didn't win, she passed away, which is kind of a morbid joke, but it's funny nonetheless. And when you see that episode, you'll understand it, and it's kind of a funny way to go into it. So the other thing that they did with this show that was unique is they did some fantasy aspects. So there are a couple episodes that we're going to talk about, particularly Black and White, where they go back and set most of the show in the 1940s, which was unique for that time. You wouldn't necessarily do that in this type of television show. Another thing that we'll talk about, and you'll see it, especially with this picture right above me, is the Shakespeare episode, where they go back and they do an episode of Taming the Shrew. They also get involved in a couple of kind of the scary episodes where they talk about a murder and a possible ghost. There's another episode where one lady claims that she's a leprechaun. So they really dealt with a little bit of fantasy as well, and that was unusual for a show of this style. So Moonlighting was so unique with all these things. You would get different things from episode to episode. It wasn't just your typical detective show where they go solve a mystery, or where you have a situation where one of the main leads might pass away in the episode. You didn't really have that like you had in other detective shows or other types of drama shows. So that's what made it unique, and that's one of the many reasons why I think you should really watch the show. So let's get into a couple of my favorite episodes, and I'll mention a few episodes that are on the list. Let's go. Before I talk about my favorite episodes, I would be remiss if I didn't talk about the music from Moonlighting. So Al Jarreau did the theme, and when they came to him, he wrote a song for the pilot, and they told him, hey, we don't know if this is going to take off, so if you don't want to do it. But he agreed to do it. He did it for the pilot, and it became a staple for the show. It is a great song. Fantastic opening. I love the opening for Moonlighting. The song is just spectacular. It's a great song. The other thing that Moonlighting did was it used a lot of popular songs. And because of the budget that they had for it, they were able to pull some of the popular songs and pay for the rights. The other great thing is that Bruce Willis and Sybil Shepherd both sing at different times during the show. There's one particular episode where Sybil Shepherd actually sings, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But Bruce Willis constantly throughout the show is singing, and that's part of his character, David Addison. Ironically, Bruce Willis did actually release an album called Return of Bruno, which had one hit on it in 1987 during the shooting of Moonlighting. So the music was a very big part of each episode. So let's talk about some of my episodes. I don't have a particular 1 to 10 order of these. I'm just going to do in order that they appeared. And I'm going to start with season 2. Season 2 and season 3 are hands down my favorite seasons. Most of my favorite episodes are in these 2 seasons, and I would encourage you to watch all of Moonlighting to get the full effect, but seasons 2 and season 3 really knock it out of the park. So the first episode I'm going to talk about is The Dream Sequence Rings Twice. And so this is the one that I had alluded to that had one of the famous cold opens. So this is the episode that had a majority of it in black and white, where they shot a little bit in color and the rest was in black and white. And Glenn Gordon Caron got Orson Welles to do the cold opening. And he didn't think he could get Orson Welles, but Orson read the script and liked it and came in. And Orson Welles was notorious for how he worked with different directors. And they thought he was going to be a problem, but he was willing to do multiple takes. He was very gracious. He signed autographs for the crew and the directors and everybody. And it just was an enjoyable experience. And Orson Welles has some of the funniest lines where one of them is that, so take grandma, the kids, aunts and uncles, and lock them in the basement as we watch this episode of Moonlighting. And it's hilarious. I encourage you to watch it. The other unique thing about this episode is that it's considered one of the best all-time episodes of Moonlighting. It won several awards, and Moonlighting itself is considered one of the top 100 TV shows of all time. And this episode in particular is one of the many reasons why. Like I alluded to, this episode was actually shot partially in black and white, and they needed the unique cameras, and they had to go to MGM to actually produce the film stock for the black and white. It really comes across great. The production is just amazing, and the story really revolves around, at the beginning, Maddie and David are solving a case for somebody, and they go to this old rundown club called the Flamingo, which was happening in place back in the 30s and 40s. And they're told by the owner that it's for sale, and he's trying to sell it. It's run down. But they're also told about the murder mystery that happened at the Flamingo. And as Maddie and David are told about this old murder, they're arguing back and forth about who possibly did it. And they go their separate ways. They go back home. And part of the reason why it's the dream sequence always rings twice is both of them fall asleep and have different dreams with different versions about what happens in the 1940s and what happened in the murders. And they both think that different things about it. And I'm not going to spoil that for you, but I will say that this is the one episode where Sybil Shepherd sings some wonderful songs. I'm not going to tell you what they are because I want you to watch the episode. She nails it. She is amazing in it. And it's just a really, really good episode. It's a lot of fun. And it really harkens back to back in the day. And it's kind of that classic movie making. So if you love old films and you have appreciation for those, check this episode out. It's really good. My next episode is actually the next episode in season 2, season 5. It's called Limbo, or it's called My Fair David. And it's one of those episodes that I've been talking about where it opens where a guy is watching college football, and he's actually watching a University of Texas game for all those Texas fans out there. And some guys come in and knock on his door at his apartment, and they are basically gangsters asking him to pay up on his debts. And it has kind of that cold opening feel where it's a kind of a thriller, kind of a mystery, kind of what's going to happen with this guy. And then it goes right back to the office. And the key thing in the office is the beginning of the office is Maddie's away at a dental appointment, and David has the office doing a hilarious limbo thing where they've got the coat hanger and they've got the limbo music playing, and he's singing and talking through it, and all the different people in the office are trying to do the limbo under this coat hanger that they're holding up, and it's hilarious. And of course, Maddie walks in and is frustrated with David for doing this. These people should be working, not goofing off, and therein lies part of the charm of this episode, where Maddie makes a deal with David that if he can be a mature adult for a week and possibly fire 2 people, that she'll give him an extra $3,000. And his bet, if he does this, he gets that, and then she would have to do the limbo. So that's part of the bet that they have going on, and just the drama and comedy with that. And then they take this case where the person at the beginning goes missing, and it's a whole drama about that. I'm not going to reveal the rest of the plot because I want you to watch this show, but this is a classic Moonlighting episode where you get really the back and forth between Maddie and David, and you kind of get a feel for the drama comedy of the show. All right, the next episode actually is an episode that's right after that, season 2, episode 6. It's not one that's commonly talked about as much among Moonlighting fans because there's so many great episodes, but I really liked it. It's called Knowing Her. And the episode is really about this client that comes in and is in Maddie's office, and she's separated, going to divorce her husband, and she's staying in a hotel, and lo and behold, some of her jewelry goes missing, and she thinks her husband that she's trying to divorce is doing different things to her to try and get her back or get her to not divorce him. And so she's going to hire Maddie and David to do that. And David walks in, and lo and behold, we find out that she was his old flame. They had lived together. They had a relationship together. And so it's interesting to see how David reacted to that. And you're like, whoa, this is interesting for David's character to kind of go through that emotionally. And then you see David kind of interact with her and kind of fall back in love with her. That's part of the story of this, and just everything that happens with that. One of the things that happens is, like I said, he kind of falls for her, and then something else happens, and Maddie's not sure. She's not sure about her character, and she thinks something's amiss. And the drama that happens with that is really good. They use some of the music that I talked about. There's a song, "This Old Heart of Mine," is used in part of this scene. It's one of the pivotal scenes of this episode, and it's just an example of the characterization where it goes from comedy to drama, and also how they were able to use some modern music. All right, so the next episode I'm going to talk about is one of my favorites in season 3. I would call this the amalgamation, what really showcases everything I've talked about with Moonlighting. It's called Symphony and Knocked Flat. And it has a cold open where David and Maddie are talking about a funk video. It has the Temptations singing Psychedelic Shack. If you get a chance, just watch that cold open on YouTube or go to Hulu and watch the entire episode. It's hilarious. It has nothing to do with the episode, but it shows the character of Maddie and David, and it's just a hilarious open. The show in itself is interesting because you have a more serious tone where there's international espionage, and it's the one with the 2 FBI agents, and it has the line that I told you about, Xeroxing the copy. And Maddie and David are caught up in an international murder plot, and it's very fascinating to see that. There's a lot of comedy, there's a little bit of drama. There's also a takeoff on the Rocky movies in part of this, but the big part about this episode is Maddie and David have a fight about the perfect date. Should it be a fun evening or should it be a fine evening? And part of this episode is Maddie challenges David to a sophisticated fine evening that she would want, and he challenges her to take him on a fun night evening for that. So it really gets into a relationship. It really showcases Moonlighting. This is at the peak of their success, and it's one of my favorite episodes, and I think it's one of the best episodes of Moonlighting. The next episode I'm going to talk about is Big Man on Mulberry Street. So you may recognize that title. It's the title of a Billy Joel song. So Moonlighting claims that Billy Joel gave them this song, saying that he had thought of moonlighting when he wrote it. In listening to Billy Joel talk about the song, I'm not sure that that's necessarily the case, but nonetheless, he gave them the song to use in the episode, and it's placed beautifully in the episode. This episode is significant because you find out that David had an ex-wife, and his ex-brother-in-law had passed away, and he goes back to Philadelphia for the funeral. And that really takes Maddie back. She didn't know that he had been married before, and it really adds to both of their characters, and it kind of shows how she kind of has feelings for him. And she has this dream where he's back, as a bartender, and she imagines his future wife coming in, and it's this amazing dance sequence that they hired a group of dancers to do, and that's a fantastic scene, and that's where Big Man on Mulberry Street really comes into play. If you get a chance to watch Moonlighting, Big Man on Mulberry Street, you'll be able to see the sequence, but I would say go watch the entire episode because it's great. I'm not going to tell you any more about the episode because there's an interesting twist at the end that you'll have to see for yourself, which was unique for that time. It's a great episode. It's a fun episode. The next episode that I'll talk about is ironically the one right after that, which is Season 3, Episode 7, Atomic Shakespeare. And this episode is one that Moonlighting is really known for. It's their take on Taming the Shrew. It has another cool cold open where a kid is having to do his homework and can't watch Moonlighting, and he has to read Shakespeare, Taming the Shrew, and he imagines it as Moonlighting. They got the Shakespearean costumes. It was actually written in iambic pentameter, which was very hard for the actors to learn their lines and do, but it has so many different references to different things in modern times. For example, the horse has BMW on it. The horse has sunglasses, and so does Petruchio, played by Bruce Willis, and then Kate, played by Sybil Shepherd. And it's a really great take on Taming the Shrew. Bruce Willis does showcase his singing ability as he sings a very famous song by the Rascals, Good Lovin'. and has his harmonica. He's a very famous for his harmonica playing, and he gets it out and does it in this show. It's a very great episode. It's one of my favorites. Check that one out. And then the final episode that I'm going to talk about is I'm Curious Maddie, and it's really the last 4 episodes have an interesting take of season 3. So there's an episode, Blonde on Blonde, where David finally realizes that he's going to tell Maddie that he loves her and he has feelings for her. And so something happens, and I won't describe it because I want you to see the episode, but needless to say, he knocks on the door late at night, and there's another guy there. And I'm not going to tell you all the specifics about it, but Maddie has an old boyfriend that looks her up and is back in the picture. And this last episode is the amalgamation of those 4 episodes that deal with her boyfriend who's trying to win her back and trying to rekindle an old flame, played by Mark Harmon. His name is Sam. And just everything that goes on between David, Sam, and Maddie, it culminates in this last one, I'm Curious Maddie. And it's basically her having to decide between one or the other. And she does decide on one of them at the very end. And it really kind of is almost the jump the shark moment of Moonlighting because it's at the end of season 3. And like I said, with some of the issues with his shoulder and her pregnancy, made season 4 and season 5 a little bit more difficult, and they kind of dipped in the ratings and kind of fell off. But this is the culmination of it. One other things about this episode was the way that they would shoot some of the love scenes. And so Glenn Gordon Caron, one of the famous things that he always does for love scenes was he takes the bed and he puts it up on the wall, and they do the love scene standing up where they have a more natural, where gravity can kind of use it, which is kind of unique, unique way of filming, kind of unique way of doing it. And I'd never heard of anything being shot like that. So check this episode out, especially the episodes before it. They're kind of condensed together. It's a really good way to end season 3. It has all kinds of twists and turns with it, and it really gets you involved in some of the characters. Please share in the comments some of your favorite episodes of Moonlighting. What did you like about this show? Like I said, it's on Hulu now, so go watch it on Hulu. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll see you on the next one.